Hey folks, it's no secret that leveling is extremely fast now thanks to the changes in 12.0.7 and Turbulent Timeways, but I wanted to figure out what the absolute best leveling method is, so I decided to set up a little experiment. I started by completing 4 time-walking dungeons on a level 80 Guardian Druid in order to receive a 30% XP buff, which took me 40 minutes and 30 seconds. If you're unsure of how this buff works, don't worry, it'll be discussed in more detail later on. However, the real test began after I obtained this buff, as I then paused my run and duplicated the character over to the public test realm for 12.0.7. From here, I was able to test 2 separate leveling methods using the exact same character, which ensures that all other variables have been eliminated. With one version of the Druid, I continued to spam time-walking dungeons until I managed to reach level 90, and this process took 3 hours and 28 minutes. In my other test, I stopped running time-walking dungeons and instead followed the newly updated route within my add-on, Follow the Arrow. The final time for the second test would have been roughly 1 hour and 54 minutes, though in an absurd twist of fate, the PTR servers actually crashed during the final 30 seconds of my run, and they've been offline ever since. This was just the cherry on top after multiple extremely buggy loading screens that I encountered when trying to enter delves, which easily lost me 10 or more minutes of time. I livestreamed this entire experiment over on my second channel, but since the run with Follow the Arrow was cut short thanks to Blizzard, I did yet another run using a different level 80 character. This time, I got a bit luckier with my 4 dungeon runs and finished in only 36 minutes, at which point I once again started following my new delve and questing route. Since this run managed to avoid the PTR jankiness, it ended up being noticeably faster, finishing at 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 9 seconds. I uploaded the full run to my second channel, and it's my current fastest 80 to 90 time, barely beating out my previous run of 1 hour and 38 minutes. Now that I've established what times you can expect to receive by using these various methods, we can go into a bit more detail on what my new route actually entails, and why it's so much faster than mindless dungeon spamming. For starters, let's touch back upon the 30% buff from Turbulent Timeways to explain how it actually works. This event will last until August 11th, and while it's active, you get a stacking XP buff whenever you complete a time-walking dungeon. This buff caps out at 4 stacks, but the way it works is a bit strange. The first 3 dungeons you complete grant you a stacking 5% XP bonus called Knowledge of the Timeways. After completing the 4th dungeon, you'll get a new buff called Mastery of the Timeways, which provides you with a flat 30% bonus to experience earned. The buff lasts for 3 hours, and any time-walking dungeons that you complete after this point will simply reset the buff's duration back to the 3-hour max. The key thing that people often miss about this buff is that it affects all forms of experience, not just time-walking dungeons. Getting a 30% XP buff is obviously extremely powerful, so it'll always be worthwhile to start by running 4 dungeons in order to obtain this. However, you have no reason to continue running additional dungeons after you've received the buff. Some people may remain convinced that dungeon spamming is a competitive leveling method, but as demonstrated in my aforementioned side-by-side test, it's simply not. Even under optimal conditions, such as instant tank queues, being fully gemmed and enchanted in BOE gear, and a solid dungeon pool from the Dragonflight expansion, this process was over an hour slower compared to my worst run with Follow the Arrow. If you think I missed out on some important optimization, you're welcome to review the full footage of my run, or even better, attempt your own faster run using time-walking dungeon spam. I want to be clear that there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying the process of spamming dungeons and finding it to be a more fun leveling method than questing or delves. I simply take issue with people who confidently state that time-walking spam is the fastest way to level, when I have demonstrated this to be a far inferior method of speed leveling for multiple expansions in a row. Whenever you see someone making this claim, ask them to back up their statement with evidence, otherwise you can safely disregard their assertions. With that out of the way, let's discuss what you can expect when using Follow the Arrow's route instead. When 12.0.7 released a few weeks ago, it brought along some sizable buffs to Delver's call quests and certain weekly activities. The original 80 to 90 alt route already included all 10 delves at various points, so it became even faster thanks to the buffs. However, I've also thoroughly tested each of the buffed weekly activities and developed a new, faster route that includes many of them. As soon as you begin following the guide and enter Silvermoon, you'll be directed to pick up a weekly quest called Hope in the Darkest Corners. This quest requires you to complete 10 delves, and since we'll be doing that anyways, it's effectively a free 100k experience. From here, the add-on will send you into Haranir to complete the Legends of the Haranir weekly, which now also rewards 100k XP after the buffs. This event is a bit complicated. There are 7 relics in total, and you'll be initially forced to complete each of them a single time across your account. Once you finish this and unlock the achievement Legends Never Die, any future characters will be able to freely select any relic of your choice. While this initial unlock process can be a bit tedious, it's important to note that all of the relics take under 5 minutes to complete, meaning it's an efficient way to level even if you're forced to pick the slowest option. With that being said, the best relic by far is Alnara's Bloom, as the entire scenario can be completed in just 1 minute. Once you unlock the ability to freely choose your relic, this is what you should select every single time. Once you finish the Legends quest, you should not immediately turn it in. You'll want to save any high-value quests like this until the very end of the guide, as you'll eventually be able to turn all of them in at the same time and skip from level 85 straight to level 90. The add-on will now direct you to begin completing the first delve in the route, Grudge Pit. In case you're new to Midnight, the main reason why delves are so lucrative for leveling is because of their associated Delver's Call quests, which received massive buffs in 12.0.7. These quests reward around 180k XP each, and each one simply tasks you with completing the associated delve on any difficulty. For this reason, it's best to complete the delves on Tier 1 difficulty, and you want to do them early on in the leveling process while enemy scaling is favorable. Do keep in mind that this is not an ironclad rule, and the difference in mob scaling at different levels won't actually cause you to lose that much time. For example, the add-on won't direct you to complete the Zul'Aman delves until later on in the route, as you'll save minutes of travel time compared to doing them early on. Each Delver's Call quest can be picked up directly inside the associated delve, so you don't need to hunt it down in the open world. Just like the Legends of the Haranir quest, you should refrain from turning these in until the end of the leveling process. Worry not, the add-on has an entire section dedicated just to the turn-in process. As for your delve companion, Valeera, you should always set her to healer or DPS spec, but she generally contributes very little while leveling. For Kyrios, your damage option is irrelevant, and you should use Mandate of Sacred Death for utility. Upon finishing Grudge Pit, you'll be directed to complete most of the other remaining delves, with the exception of Shadow Enclave and the ones in Zul'Aman, as those will be done later. Just before entering the Shadowguard Point delve in Voidstorm, I recommend taking a slight detour to complete the Abundance scenario. This is another buffed weekly from 12.0.7, and while it has a location in every single zone, I found that the Voidstorm one is the most convenient. The event itself is pretty straightforward. You jump into the cave, kill enemies, and collect materials from them, and then drop off those materials at a shrine. Abundance is a bit problematic though, as it has a fixed time of 3 minutes, meaning you can't speed it up at all, and if you fail to complete the quest on your first try, it'll take you another full 3 minutes even if you only barely fell short. To top it off, the Abundance enemies provide no mob kill experience, which is a pretty major downside. In some of my speedruns with full XP modifiers, I've actually started skipping the Abundance quest as it tends to fall behind the other options. You should still consider doing it if you don't have the 25% Warband Mentor bonus, which is why I've still included it in the route. After finishing Shadowguard Point and returning to Silvermoon, you'll begin the Eversong Woods section of the add-on. If you used my original alt route from earlier in the expansion, this will be very familiar, as you're directed to complete many efficient side quest chains that overlap with the Eversong campaign. However, there is one notable addition in 12.0.7, that being Saltheril's Soiree. As with most of the other buffed events in this patch, the Soiree is a bit convoluted. You have to speak with Saltheril to select a faction, and while the initial quest here gives decent XP, it can only be done once per week on your account. The real meat of the event is the follow-up quest that you can grab from your chosen faction's representative. It's called Defending the Runestones, and it's this quest specifically which was buffed in 12.0.7, as it now gives 100k XP. There's a few other quests that you can grab here, but they rotate every single week and will vary depending on which faction you selected, making it impossible for me to include them in the add-on. Generally speaking, these quests can be ignored, but I find that the Blood Knights sometimes offer a few really easy to complete quests that you might find worthwhile. As for the Runestone quest, this has the potential to be highly efficient, but it does require you to get a bit lucky. If you open up your map, you can look around for the location of the blue quest marker that indicates which of the runestones is currently active. This is where the RNG kicks in. Some runestone locations are super far away, making it impractical to fly to them as you'll waste a lot of time traveling. Once you make it there, you could also realize that nobody else is around, at which point it's not worth the time required to single-handedly start up and complete the event. This has happened to me on a few runs, and it's totally okay if you aren't able to complete this quest. Follow the Arrow has more than enough built into it to quickly get you to level 90, especially if you have the Turbulent Timeways buff. The reason why I've included Saltherils in this route is because if you do get lucky, it is an incredibly efficient source of experience. Most of the runestone locations are directly along the main questing path, and as long as a few other players are present, the event should only take a few minutes to complete. In some extreme cases, you may arrive just in time to tag the final boss as it dies, which would make this about 30 seconds of time for 100k experience. While this is an extreme outlier, the event is usually efficient enough to make it worth completing compared to other activities like dungeons or abundance. At some point during the Eversong Woods section of the add-on, you should reach level 84, but the exact timing will be different depending on how many XP modifiers you have. Whenever this occurs, you should skip past the rest of the route and follow the arrow, and complete the final 3 delves: Shadow Enclave, Atalaman, and Twilight Crypts. The experience earned from these delves should be enough to get you close to level 85, which is where you'll begin the final turn-in section of the add-on. However, before we discuss that, I want to take a moment to go over some alternate strategies that you can consider instead of the traditional questing path. Note that these are not a replacement for delves or the time walking buff, which are significantly more valuable than anything else mentioned in the video. Rather, these methods are a bit slower but still viable alternatives to Eversong questing, Saltheril Soiree, or Abundance. Prey is a bit of an interesting case, as I've already built it into the route for Follow the Arrow in many zones. The issue with Prey as a leveling method is that it's very slow if you complete it in a vacuum. The process of hunting your prey can take up to 5 minutes or more, and you generally don't get a lot of additional experience along the way. I've seen a few people advocating for completing each prey hunt, or even bonus random prey hunts, but this is a fairly inefficient way to level if it's the only thing you're doing. The key to completing prey is to passively work towards the final showdown as you finish other activities in a zone. This is why I have it built into Follow the Arrow, as you usually get enough ambushes while questing in Voidstorm or Eversong Woods to fully complete a prey hunt, making it effectively 100k XP for the 1 minute or so that it takes to find and defeat the final boss. When done this way, prey is incredibly efficient. The only problem is that, with max XP modifiers, I found that I don't spend enough time in the open world to actually finish a full hunt. This means that Prey will usually be a great option for players who haven't yet obtained the maximum 25% Warband Mentor bonus, but eventually may want to skip those sections of Follow the Arrow. Another leveling method that received buffs in 12.0.7 is the new Void Assault and Invasion Point events. In this case, I need to make an important distinction. The Void Assaults, aka the random objectives in Eversong or Zul'Aman, are terrible and should never be completed unless you just really enjoy them for some reason. The invasion points, which alternate between Nightall or Vol, have a bit more merit, but they still have some issues, which is why I haven't included them in the add-on. One obvious problem with the invasion points is that mounting is disabled, so travel time ends up being a significant factor here. This can be slightly mitigated if you use old-school leveling consumables such as Gunshoes or Goblin Gliders, but I generally find that most people dislike using these items. Additionally, while individual world quests or objectives give slightly more XP than normal, many of them take longer to complete than the average questing hub, so they usually are less efficient on average. The main reason to even level here would be to finish the weekly quest, which requires you to fill a progress bar, and to kill the active world boss. Both of these quests provide 100k XP, which is a lot, but it's often impossible to find a world boss group, and the weekly quest to fill a bar requires you to spend roughly an hour just finishing activities in the zone before it's complete. For these reasons, I have found it to almost always fall behind other methods in terms of leveling efficiency, but some players have expressed that they think it's good enough, especially since it provides some currency which can then later be spent on endgame gear. Lastly, while the normal Midnight Dungeon quests did receive a slight buff, they are still horrifically slow for leveling, far slower than even time walking dungeons, and they should be completely disregarded. Once you have completed all 10 delves and reached at least level 84.5, you're ready to proceed to the final section of Follow the Arrow. If you find that you're still a bit short on experience here, you may want to return to the Eversong or Zul'Aman sections and complete a few additional quests. Alternatively, you can start by turning in everything you have now, and then return to questing if you fall just short of level 90. This will cause the mob scaling to be slightly more challenging, but there's less of a chance of overshooting. The final section begins with a reminder to enable War Mode, as this causes all quests that you complete to provide 15% additional experience, even if you did the actual objectives with War Mode disabled. Since most of the final turn-ins are located in sanctuary areas, your risk of getting ganked is extremely low. You'll begin by handing in 2 Delver's Call quests in a Manizar village, at which point the add-on will direct you to return to Saltheril Soiree to complete those quests. You'll now return to Silvermoon City and hand in 4 Delver's Calls, as well as the quest Hope in the Darkest Corners. Keep in mind that War Mode doesn't apply in capital cities, so these quests will give 15% less XP than the others. This brings us to the crafting section of the guide, which has proved to be a bit controversial over the years. I know that many people dislike crafting as a leveling method, but the reality is that it's by far the most efficient source of XP, even compared to delves. I've also put together a shopping list in Follow the Arrow, which is incredibly cheap. It requires only a couple thousand gold for the entire process. You'll make way more than this by completing a single weekly quest, so it's easily affordable for every player. Within the add-on, I've already put together a detailed step-by-step instruction list for finishing every craft, so I won't waste time repeating it all here. The one thing I want to stress is that the process is incredibly simple, it only takes a few minutes to complete, and it can be finished with zero prior knowledge of WoW's crafting system. If you're a new player who has been intimidated by this leveling method, please trust me and give it a chance. The add-on makes things super simple. After you've obtained all possible experience from crafting, the only thing that's left is to turn in the final Delver's Call and weekly quests within Voidstorm and Haranir. If you followed all the instructions up until this point, the last Delver's Call at Grudge Pit should be enough to get you to exactly level 90. If you fall short, there are plenty of bonus questlines within Follow the Arrow that can help cover the gap. And with that, we've covered everything that you need to know in order to consistently level from 80 to 90 in under 2 hours. If you're looking for more information about 1 to 80 leveling, I have guides for both Horde and Alliance on my channel that go over the best Chromie time routes. While these routes are not yet implemented into Follow the Arrow, they are my #1 priority at the moment, and I'm confident they'll be fully integrated by the release of patch 12.1 next month. On that note, I want to give a huge thank you to my supporters over on Patreon who will be able to help beta test early versions of these routes before they're fully released onto the add-on. I intend to keep all guides in Follow the Arrow completely free to access until the end of time, but it does require a lot of effort to actively develop. If you found the add-on or any of my guides to be helpful, it would mean a lot if you could help support me over on Patreon. If you're unable to do that, I'd still greatly appreciate it if you could throw this video a like and subscribe to the channel, as that way more people will be able to find these guides as well.